Welcome to the Choose Love podcast. My name is Scarlett Lewis. I'm the founder of the Choose Love movement, and we have a very special guest, a new friend to Choose Love. His name is Dr. Joel Gator Walsh, and he has a new book out that we're going to be discussing, but we're going to be talking all things kids, what's going on in our world today, but even more importantly, solutions. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to chat.
Oh yeah, me too. So can you go ahead and introduce yourself a bit to our audience? Give them some idea of your background, which is really fun. Why you're called Dr. Gator, and also just a little bit of your history and your thought process.
Absolutely. So the Gator part, I guess we can start with that. So people always think it's a Florida thing. It's not a Florida thing. I grew up in Toronto, nothing against Florida. It's actually a wife thing. My wife's last name's Intelligator. And so people started thinking that, they started calling me Dr. Gator. They thought it was funny. It kind of is more memorable. Kids like it. So I kind of stuck and I have kept it in. So the Dr. Gator thing, it's a wife thing, not a Florida thing. So that's where that came from.
So
And then, oh, go
you're a
ahead.
pediatrician.
I am a pediatrician. So I did all the regular training. I went to a great Western medicine program in Los Angeles. I got a little bit frustrated with the regular system and medications for everything all the time. And I started seeing patients, family, friends kind of going outside of the medical system and getting better from things that they had been told that were lifelong or they needed to take a medication forever. And so that really piqued my interest. And so I started learning over the last decade or so about integrative medicine and alternative medicine. And so I've tried to blend the best of both worlds together. And that's why I kind of call what I do integrative pediatrics, because it's a blend. I'm not against Western medicine. We do medications if we need it, but I just try to minimize using those as much as possible and offer other alternatives when it makes sense and is reasonable. And so I opened up my own practice in Los Angeles about, I guess, 7 years ago now. And it's been really exciting to see how interested people have been in that and how many amazing individuals have kind of come to the office. And it hasn't really, I haven't had to do any advertising or anything. It just seems like people are interested in this, which is great. And then I started doing more social media after seeing that that's a great way to kind of get your message out there. I was pretty against doing it for a long time, but then I did start, and it's been exciting to see how much that has grown over the last few years. And that also tells me that there's such an interest in it. But with social media, of course, you only get small snippets. You don't get to dive into anything in any depth. And so that's really what led me to want to write a book and a parenting book, which is Parenting at Your Child's Pace. And I wanted to really talk about integrative parenting. So kind of taking that same philosophy and really blending the best of all worlds together when it comes to different philosophies and helping to teach parents how to think through the different questions that come up very commonly in my office, teach them how I think through things, and not to tell people there's one right way versus the other, but go through and discuss the nuances of the different philosophies out there and then help people to make a decision that's right for them and their child, because there are very few topics that are very definitive, like this is the only way that everybody should do it. And there's so much research that we know exactly how to do it. But it seems like when you look on social media these days and when you look all around, that there's like one right way to do it. And if you don't do it that way, then it's the worst thing in the world. And so I've noticed that there's a lot more parenting stress and trying to help parents de-stress and think through things, and also talk about stuff from a health perspective. I think a lot of parenting books really these days are focused more from the therapy side of things, like therapists mostly are writing them, and not as many doctors are really writing books these days. And if they do, it's more of a health book. So I wanted to have a book that kind of combines those worlds.
So integrative medicine, what is all encompassing in your methodology? I know Western medicine because you went to a traditional school, but then what else do you include?
So to me, it's bringing in any philosophy, any thought, any modalities that could be useful for that patient on the day. I think a little bit for me is really thinking about prevention and thinking about root cause. So when I started learning some functional medicine, it was really interesting because as I went to the conferences, it was like, like, why don't we think like that? Why don't we think about, what's going on, why this rash is here? Sometimes you obviously do, but a lot of medicine is really, you have this rash, here's the medication. You have this infection, here's the treatment, but we don't often think about why. And we certainly don't spend a lot of time thinking about preventing illness or the foundations of our health, like diet and exercise and sleep and stress. These aren't things that we talk about a lot in the office, but they're of course extremely important. And now that we're seeing chronic disease rates skyrocket, and as a parent and a practitioner and a health advocate, it's very frustrating to see that we're at a point now where almost 50% of kids have a chronic disease, more than that in adults. And it's a very staggering, scary number, and it should not be that way, but we're not really focusing on the foundations and moving things back in a better direction. Of course, we're better at infectious disease. People used to die when they were 40, right? So we do some things better, but now life expectancy is going back down. Chronic disease rates are skyrocketing. So there's some middle ground there, and some things that we have learned that are great, and maybe some things we need to go backwards a little bit for our health.
I mean, first of all, addressing the root cause, that is exactly what I've been doing for the last 11 years. Even in school shootings, I saw everyone treating the symptom and hardening schools and doing anti-gun stuff, but really nobody that I could see was looking at the root cause of the pain that becomes anger, that then translates into violence or escalates into substance abuse, mental illness. So I'm really root cause focused. And I loved when you said that. But I mean, the statistics that you're throwing out here are abysmal, especially for, for us. We've come so far, and it seems like we're going backwards. I mean, a little bit to me, of course, with being able to keep our kids safe. But also, you just said that chronic diseases in kids is skyrocketing, and it's actually overtaken chronic diseases in adults, and that 50% of kids have a chronic disease now. And like, why is this happening? It should not be like this. It should be going the opposite direction. So what is going on? What's happening?
Well, I mean, that is the perfect question. And that's what I talk about as is so frustrating, is we don't actually know, right? We don't really truly know what is going on, and we absolutely should. I have theories, I think there's a lot of good theories out there in terms of what is going on, and we can talk about that in a second. But to me, the biggest problem right now is the fact that we have this issue. It's going in the wrong direction. We can say that if you have two kids, 1 out of 2 of them is probably going to have a chronic disease. And yet we don't know why, or we don't at least know the major factors or contributors. We're not studying this like crazy to be like, all right, well, here are the top 10 things that we know contribute to all these illnesses. So let's make sure that we're focusing on how do we improve these things to go in a better direction. We're not doing that, right? I mean, there's certainly like little research here and there and things that we're talking about, but we're not diving into it. And to me, it's the two big things are crappy food. So we're not getting the nutrients that we need for healthy bodies, and too many toxins. We're just exposed to chemicals and toxins to the point where our bodies just can no longer handle it. It's just too many, too frequently. And you mix that in with a poor nutrition, lack of a good diet, and not the nutrients that our body and our immune systems need to function. And at some point, for everybody, you get to a point where it's just too much. And I think that we're getting to that point for most people at this point, or half of people, I guess, at this point. And that's why we're seeing this escalation, because our bodies are just so inflamed, and then it expresses itself in different ways, whether it's an autoimmune condition, diabetes, whatever it is for mental health concerns. It expresses itself in different ways in different people. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is the similar root cause.
So you said crappy food and toxins. And can you go a little bit more into toxins? I know I'm at my friend's right now in Florida, ironically, and she has sunscreen, and she's, passing it out. Everybody's got to put on sunscreen before we go into the pool. And I thought, I said, well, is that one of the sunscreens that has the cancer causing agents? And she's like, I don't know. I just use it up, And so there's so much that we've learned about what is being sold and used every day, just kind of as I don't know, we don't question very much. And is that what you're talking about? Things like that? Or
yeah, there's so many, right? I mean, it's so infinite at this point, it's hard to keep up. But I think it starts with the chemicals on food, and then we can kind of move into like skincare products and other things.
Yeah.
But our food is sprayed in chemicals. It's mass produced. There's pesticides sprayed on it, then there's other things sprayed on it afterwards. And so we're getting this toxic buildup on our food almost always in the best case scenario of when you're getting food. And then you add to that the chemicals in the water that you drink, in the air that we breathe, that are in your home, in the products that you buy, and everything is filled with chemicals, and our bodies can only handle so much. And one great study that I love to quote, I don't know if you know that the Harvard study on soup, but it was such a great, interesting study where they were looking at BPA levels in urine. And they took a bunch of patients and they gave them 5 days of canned soup. And then they gave them 5 days of homemade soup. And the cans have BPA lining, right? So they were looking at the BPA in the urine. And the difference between 5 days was 1,000% in the urine. And that to me is such a great, simple study because it says, look, even the little changes that we make have such a huge impact. 1,000% difference in 5 days. Well, think about if you have that canned soup for a year. Think about every other chemical, everything that you're putting in your body. Like a little change of making a homemade soup, that matters. If you have a little bit of BPAs at the end of the world, probably not. But if you have a ton of that for many years, plus every other thing, does it add up? Of course it does, right? And so I think that we need to start thinking in this way and trying to make small changes because our bodies are fantastic and amazing and we can handle a lot, but I just think that it's too much and we're not focused on these little things and we're letting it add up to a point where it's spilling over into disease.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Dr. Bruce Lipton?
I know that, yeah, I know a little bit about it, yeah.
Well, so he talks about epigenetics and how even though we have a genetic predisposition to something, it's our thoughts, it's our response to our environment, it's a whole host of other things that determine whether they turn on or not. So in other words, if your parents have something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have it. We're not victims of our genes. And he talks about us as cars on an assembly line, which I thought was really interesting. So he said, the cars go through and they're built really well. In general, there's maybe 1% that's a lemon, but the rest of the cars, if you maintain them and you treat them well, then they're going to go 100,000 miles without a whole lot of problems. And he said, we're kind of like cars. And I believe that too. And so to have this amount of dis-ease happening in our kids is alarming. And I have to say it again, I've been calling for our priority to be our children's safety, health, and well-being. Like as a nation, I would like for that to be our priority. So when there's a shooting that happens and they ask me, the president hasn't spoken yet, what do you want him to say? I always say, no more tired rhetoric. I want our priority to be safety, health, and well-being of our kids because that's our future. Right. And I don't really understand why it's not. It's an anathema to me. And I'm going to continue to sing that from the rooftops. And obviously you are too. But I have a friend too, by the way, that eats soup every single day. So I'm going to be telling him about this because I'm pretty sure it's Campbell's soup. That is just really crazy. And they are smallish changes, even if you don't make your own soup. Because I know as a single mom, and I took my kids to daycare and I worked full time, and it was a lot. I was tired, but you can buy different brands, or you can go to different stores and it's spend a little bit more, but feel good about what you're putting in your kid's belly. And then so you've got the food, and then you've got toxins, and what else? I mean, you said that you had some theories, and I do too, but I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about what you think those theories are, and then what we can do about them, because this is reaching a crisis level. It is at a crisis level. I mean, we've got our US Surgeon General coming out, and I don't know, every couple of years there's another crisis that our kids are facing. This most recent one is the cell phone. So what are some of your theories and things that people can watch out for?
Yeah, I think I just want to reiterate a couple of things that you said that were so brilliant that we kind of glossed over really quickly. Is that number one, you talk about the genetics and epigenetics, which I think is such an important factor in talking about a foundational change, because I see, and it sounds like you've seen the same thing, where the media and the way that we're kind of talking about things is pushing it away from our responsibility and saying, oh, it's just genetics. This is just happening. And that is not true. I mean, for sure, genetics plays a role. There's no question about that, right? There are some diseases which are completely genetic. We know that. There are genetic differences. Genetical, I made up the word up. Genetic differences in individuals. And so the way that we respond to, let's say, food is going to be different, right? Some people are going to gain more weight if they eat something versus somebody else. But we have a lot of control over most things. It is not our genetics. Our genetics have not changed over a couple of decades. And so we have to get away from that and start to take back our responsibility. It seems like we're pushing it away because of blame and shame. And as a practitioner and as a dad, it's not about blaming anybody. It's about looking at the situation, saying, here's where we are, and it's not great, and we need to do something different or many things different so that we can worry about our kids' health and focus on their future and their health. And if we take the onus away from the family and away from everybody in society, then we just, oh, it's just genetics, then we don't have to do anything about it. But if we say that, then maybe parents are going to feel bad because they were like, oh, the food I was giving my kid actually caused their symptoms. But it's not about that. It's about learning and realizing that there are some things we can do maybe differently that can improve their health in the long run. And there is no reason why we have to feel blame or shame. We just learn. We didn't know. We were marketed to for many years. Most of our parents and grandparents kind of moved from we cook at home and we have a lot of family time and this is the way that it is, to, we mass produce things and TV dinners and fast and efficient. And there's some good things about efficiency, but you lose health. And that's not the priority when it comes to business. They don't care about your health for the most part, right? They care about making money. That's their job as a business. We shouldn't feel bad about that. We just know, right? If you're a corporation, you're not here to make somebody healthy. You're here to make money. And so we have to kind of push back and make sure that they're also creating things for health based on what we buy. And it's a big issue and something that we can do something about. We can make a difference. Just like you said, one of the big things we can do is to read the labels, right? That's the biggest thing that I ever say to parents, that it doesn't cost you anything to start becoming a savvy consumer. You don't need a PhD. Right? You don't need a PhD to read the label and know that there's a word on there I don't even know what it is, so it's probably not good for me. Pick real words, pick real food, and just start to learn. As you start to see ingredients you don't know what they are, you can Google it, you can start to learn about them, but you don't need to do that. You could still buy a bag of chips, but you could go to the aisle and look at the 2 bags of chips that are there, look at the ingredients that can be the same price, and pick the one with better ingredients. Then over time, maybe we can make different choices and get other things. But we're not saying go from chips to broccoli, just little decisions. Get rid of a chemical here, a chemical there, and that adds up. And then over time, then all these changes make a big difference, and we start to notice that our kids are healthier. So I think we can do that. Yes, sometimes it costs more, but it doesn't always cost more. I understand that everybody is wherever they are in terms of their finances. So you got to do whatever you can do within your means, but everybody can make better choices. You can cook more. I understand that everybody's busy, but we can prioritize cooking and maybe one more meal a week. We can hopefully all do that. We can buy the better product for the same price. And as we are able to, we start doing a little more research. It doesn't always have to be more expensive. You can buy things directly from farmers and it can be cheaper. You take out the middleman, and it can be actually cheaper to get better food. So it's not always more expensive. Sometimes it is, but to me, again, we go back to the numbers. They are what they are. And you can say, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, it costs too much. And that's fine. If you want to do that, that's up to you. And every parent can make their own decisions for their own family. But the statistics don't lie. It's not to scare people. They just are what they are. And if you want to have healthy kids, then you have to do something different than the masses are doing at this point. You have to take it into your own hands, because what we're doing isn't working for long-term health. We know this. And that is why I wrote this book, because I want to get to parents, educators from day one and say, look, even in my first chapter, it's we have to focus on the foundations of health. This sets up for everything else. It doesn't matter you talk about tantrums or sleep or all these things are affected by our health. And it's a lot easier to manage temper tantrums if you have a child who has eaten healthy food, right? I mean, all these things are foundational and they all go back to that. Of course, there are different ways you can handle those things, different foods you can start with, baby-led weaning versus purees, okay? Those 2 things, you can make a decision between those 2, but the foundational choice has to be that it's a healthy food in the first place, right? And so I wanted to really focus on that. And I think that's a unique perspective for the book, which a lot of parenting books don't really take in that health perspective. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, I guess. But
No,
yeah.
that was good. Thank you. So your book is called Parenting at Your Child's Pace.
Mhm.
And can you explain the title?
Yeah, so realistically, for me, again, a lot of what we talked about, it's parents are comparing themselves more than ever, and especially in this era of social media, we're comparing to other people and influencers, and it just creates this stress that I don't think ever existed before for parents. There's lots of other stresses out there, and it doesn't mean that life can't be stressful, but I feel like in many ways it was easier to be a parent 100 years ago because you had a question, you asked grandma, you asked your cousins. That was it. You didn't have a whole internet to compare to or social media. Sometimes it's good. I mean, we can get information. That's great because grandma might not always be correct about everything. But it was much easier when you had one opinion versus everybody's opinion now, and so can become very difficult and debilitating and stressful for parents to make any decision because no matter what they do, it seems like it's the worst decision in the world. And one influencer says that if you do this, it's going to kill your child or going to cause this or that. And we have to get back to the basics and take in information. I'm okay with Googling. A lot of doctors say, no, you shouldn't. I don't think that's true. I think it's good to have information. That's fine. But I think that you have to recognize the way that the world is in terms of media online. Everything's about fear. Everything's about grabbing your attention. Everything talks about the worst possible scenario. Everything is about not getting sued, right? These are the things that matter online to people. And so you take in the information, you synthesize it, and then you figure out what the best decision is for your family based on your gut and your instincts. It's okay to learn and be mindful and aware, but not to let it stress you out too much. And we don't always know what's going to be best. Parenting is a cycle. It's a circle. You figure things out as you go. You try something, you see if it works. And so again, it's at your own pace, at your family's pace. I think that is the most stress-free way to do things and not to get bogged down with all the information that is out there, which I think, well, I'm for sure seeing it in parents where I get a lot more questions these days in the office on basic stuff that they know the answer to, but they're just so terrified to make a decision. When it's like, oh, well, what would you do if you had a cold? What would you do if you banged your finger? Like most parents know these things, but they're so afraid to do the wrong thing, or the internet says that they're doing the wrong thing, so they ask questions. It's fine to ask questions of your doctor, of course, but I've seen kind of this gradual movement towards a parenting where parents don't feel like they can trust their gut or that they know what they're doing, which you do. Like we have this innate into us. We can figure most things out. We know what to do most of the time.
Do you think that that has anything to do with just being pumped with fear
Hmm.
and front row tickets to the worst of humanity? Right
Hmm.
here, I'm trying to show my cell phone, and then knowing that when we are and anxious is afraid, that we really put blinders on, and there's just so much information, and there's no way that we can take in as much information as there is. I was at a family July 4th party yesterday, and there was a young mom. She had was a 5-month-old baby, and I was just kind of talking to her a little bit like an older person would who's already had 2 kids. And she was saying, yeah, I read that on the internet, but then I read this. And there seems to be, as you said, a lot of conflicting information. And then it seemed like she was talking to me and maybe making the tiebreaker with things that I was saying, I hope. And
You're a good
so
resource.
well, yeah, I am, because I'm totally solely focused on this every day, all day long.
Mhm.
But it's so much, and there's just so much. I don't know. Also, even I don't know, new information, and then I'm just going to say it. There's a little bit of misinformation out there, and who do you trust?
Right.
And I think maybe that's part of what you're seeing when they come in and they're like, do I band-aid this cut or should we leave it open? It's like, we're just so saturated at this point. And I feel it in myself too. How do we sort through everything?
Right, and that's exactly what I'm saying, and what I'm seeing is that there's just so much information. A lot of it is fear-based, divisive. We see
Right.
everything online is fighting, but a lot of what we see online these days, especially with media or headlines, it's like grab your attention, fear-based. You actually read the article, it's not that scary, but you look at the headline and it is.
Right.
But we don't always read the articles. So I think that that is exactly what's going on. Is parents are kind of stuck and they see something and then they're just not sure what to do, or they don't trust their instincts. And great examples are like baby-led weaning versus purees. I get parents all the time coming in for their children when, when they're around 6 months, when they want to start eating, and they're scared to do baby-led weaning because they're worried about giving their kids chunks, right? And they're scared they're going to choke. But the internet says, oh, this is, some people say that are into baby-led weaning, like, this is what you have to do. This is the best thing. This is better for your oral motor skills. If you don't do this, you're going to have all sorts of problems later. But they want to do purees. And I remind them, well, number one, you can do both, right? You can start with whatever you want to do. If you're super stressed about eating every meal, then that's not good for you. That's not good for your child. So, the net negative is probably very huge there. And nobody got into Harvard or some college because of they baby-led wean versus purees. I mean, it really probably doesn't actually make any difference. And this is a great example of one of those things where we're worried about something that's really not the thing to worry about. Like, there are kids that have no food in the world, right? Like, that is the thing to worry about. And you have a baby-led weaning versus purees. Like, who really cares, right? You could do both.
Right.
Start with some soft food, but parents feel paralyzed in starting feeding, or they do something that they don't want to do innately or they're scared of because the internet told them. So it's again, it's fine because maybe baby-led weaning is the best thing for your child and you never learned about it if you didn't have online. So it could give you good information, but we have to learn as parents how to synthesize, take in both sides, read about them, read about the pros and the cons, and then say, okay, I read about baby-led weaning, I read about purees, I don't feel comfortable doing baby-led weaning right just yet. I'm going to start with some purees, we'll work up to baby-led weaning in a couple of weeks, and I feel good about that, and let's just try. Or you try baby-led weaning and your kid starts choking a little bit, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore, so you switch to purees. That is the way that we can move through things, I think, in a more peaceful way, in a more simple way, in a more stress-free way. And that is the way that I try to talk through things in the book and in my office, because again, there's no one right way. Really isn't. And there's not evidence that's very clear that baby-led weaning is better. Come on, that's not true.
Hi, my name is Scarlett Lewis. I'm the founder of the Choose Love movement. I founded this organization following the murder of my 6-year-old son, Jesse, and 27 others at Sandy Hook Elementary School. I realized then that we must come together in order to solve the escalating issues of violence, substance abuse, and mental illness in our country and world. I created the Choose Love movement because, as humans, we are 99.9% genetically the same. We all need love, and we all also feel pain. We teach all ages how to choose love and grow through pain. It's pretty simple. Love feels good, and anger, hatred, and resentment feel bad. Hurt people hurt people. Even though we can't always choose what happens to us, we can always choose how we respond. Love is always the strongest response. 6-year-old Jesse stood up to the shooter and saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. We all have the capacity for that courage. Join the Choose Love movement today and be part of the solution by creating a safer, more peaceful, and loving world. Thank you.
And there's just so much information, though, that we have information overload, and then you can't make a decision. So you have to, I would go to mindfulness for that, have some quiet time and think about it, make your list, talk with an actual human being, like maybe your mom or your grandmother. It's funny, I have 3 brothers, and my mom helped me out a lot with my kids, but my brothers were like, whenever she tried to give any advice, they said, we have the internet. Like, no, like, don't even go there. The internet knows better, which is really funny. And I think really, who knows better, and you can learn from mistakes too, by the way, is a real life person that's done it. Sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, I was asked this question on a podcast a few weeks ago about, like, well, if grandma says one thing and the internet says the other thing, like, who is right? And I posted about it too a couple weeks ago, I think, now at this point. And it's like, I think it's so interesting because to me, it's so obvious. It's like, trust the people that know you, that love you. You have to weigh everything, and maybe your family, there's someone that's not that trustworthy, or somebody that's not right for you. But in general, a person who loves you and cares about you is going to give you the information based on what they know, and based on knowing you and your family. And so I would put more weight into that versus something on the internet that you don't know. And it doesn't mean the internet can't be right sometimes. It doesn't mean that grandma can't be wrong sometimes. But if you're going to weigh things and it's an even split, like, I would weigh the person that knows me and knows my kids more and try that thing first. At least that's me.
And of course, any opportunity we have to put this thing down and just make eye to eye contact. How much of what is going on do you think is the problem of the cell phone for, and I'm talking about adults because you've seen a difference. I have seen a difference in the way that adults are parenting their kids with the cell phone. There's a lot of time on it. I see kids trying to get their parents' attention and they're on their cell phone. I see families on the beach, parents watching movies while their kids are playing in the waves. I mean, there's much less eye contact, not just with their kids, but also amongst us. And, I was in an airport, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and it was eerie because it was so quiet, but it was so crowded. It was like maybe the most traveled day in history. So it was a couple of weeks ago, and it was just completely silent. And I'm looking around and everybody is on their device. You have kids who would usually be running around, falling, parents running after them with headphones on, looking at iPads. And it was almost like I sat down next to a guy because he wasn't on his device. And I said, what is going on here? Like, this is very creepy. And he just didn't seem to be as concerned about it as I was. But how much of it is that, and what can we do?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I feel that way too a lot of times. Sometimes I'll get that feeling if you're at like a show or something and everybody's, holding it up, taking a video, and like the entire crowd is holding. I'm like, why is nobody watching? Like, that's to me is like a very similar, scenario in my mind of exactly what you said. Because I feel like, yeah, people live on their phones now, and that, there's some good and bad with phones and technology for sure. But it's hard to quantify because I think there are just so many issues, but it's certainly one of the major issues in my mind in terms of mental health. I think that is a huge problem. And certainly if you talk about teens and younger children, it's probably one of the biggest issues why we've seen such a drastic issue with mental health. I mean, again, the statistics on mental health are staggeringly bad. Like at 18 years old, 50% of teenagers have had a mental health diagnosis by 18. That's crazy. 1/3 of teen girls thought about suicide. 1/4 have a plan. 1 out of 10 have tried. Like, those numbers are nuts. Like, so crazy that we're at a point where 1/3 of girls are thinking about suicide, teen girls. Like, that is absurd. So there's more than one reason. It's not just screens. We're not going to bash screens totally, but it's a huge issue. Teens are on screens on average like 7 to 9 hours a day at this point, which is absurd. And I don't think the screen in and of itself is the problem. It's what they're doing on the screen and then what they're not doing. I mean, I think the biggest issue with screens is when we're talking about 7 to 9 hours, it's, well, what are you not doing? Just like you said, you're not engaging. You're not talking to your family. You're not making the eye contact. You're not getting outside. You're not cooking. What are you not doing when you're on the screen? If you're going to do your homework on screen, okay, so be it. If you watch a little bit of a show, not the end of the world. If you're traveling and you're watching a movie, to me, not the end of the world for these things, but we are on screens like for our whole life. We're living on there and we're not getting all of the other inputs and all the other things that we need. And so I think that we just need to be mindful of this. And then also the social media, right? There's a social media aspect of screens, which that to me is the bigger issue because they're built to make you engage. They're built to make you stay on them. They're built to hit that dopamine and give you that fix. It's a drug, it's addictive, and to keep you on there. And then also the algorithms are now pointing us all in the direction of anger and division and making people want to argue and showing you things that you want to look at, but really it's like making you upset about things. So I think you can curate your feed in social media to be a good thing. I mean, it used to be that we saw puppies and travel pictures and funny videos and all these things, and now it seems like it's all angering. So you can curate your feed to be a little bit better, I think, and that's a big thing that can go in a good direction. But there's no question that mental health of teens has been severely affected. I'm really glad to see that this is one of the big topics this year. With Jonathan Haidt's book, it really did bring this right to the forefront of conversation, which is great because I think it is time and it absolutely needs to happen. That we need to understand that most of it's not good for anybody, but let alone for teens that haven't been in the world very long, that don't have any frame of reference. That's very hard to see your friends go on vacation, see your friends doing this other thing, have people chit-chatting online all day, not focusing in school and scrolling. Like it's just not a ideal way to learn, and that doesn't mean that you could never be on these things, but there's obviously clearly a huge issue, and so instead of ignoring it, we should start to manage it just like we do with drugs and alcohol and driving and all sorts of other things. We manage to keep it safer for kids, and I think we need to do that with phones too, and help kids to focus on schoolwork and learning and spending time with their friends, and then as they get older, then people could make whatever decisions they want to make, but we have to identify that there's a problem, and I think it's very clear at this point that there is a problem. So therefore, the question is, what are we going to do about it?
So, what would you tell parents? I mean, when my kids, well, when my first son was young, and he's 24 now, but it was that time when all those baby Mozart VHSs were coming out, and they had the different ones, and I would put him in front of that because I wanted him to be smart. And they had studies, I think I remember, that showed that a baby's prefrontal cortex would develop faster or something like that. And so I put him in front of that, and thank goodness it was before screens, because I am addicted. And so what would you say? I think that's now been debunked, that all the research that they put out saying that would help your baby become smarter. But then look, so there I was, and I trusted this brand that was, oh my gosh, I'm sure they made a killing during that time. And I consider myself relatively smart. I don't follow trends usually. And so anyway, how would you counsel parents? Because I know there's a lot of parents listening, but there's also a lot of teachers, and the teachers, I call teachers boots on the ground soldiers, capital SOUL, soldiers, boots on the ground, all the issues that are going on with kids, physically, mentally, emotionally, they're walking through the classroom door, and teachers have to deal with them. So, and I know that sometimes there's a kind of resistance with what teachers think is appropriate in the classroom and what parents think is appropriate at home. And I know this is just like, whoa, that was a loaded question. I put way too much in one question, but how do we navigate this?
Yeah, so at first I would say to the research. So there has been, I would say, a lot of research at this point that says that you can learn from screens. So it's not that you cannot learn. Things like Sesame Street and other educational programs, there are very clear evidence that you do learn from those things. What is also clear at this point, now that it's been many more years from that original research, is that you learn better not from screens. Right. So that is where the kind of difference is. Like, we know that we learn better in terms of reading. If somebody's teaching you, you're kind of having an active, engaging reading and writing versus just watching on a screen. You still learn, but you just don't learn as well, and you don't learn as much. So it doesn't mean that, if you're gonna pop your kid in front of a screen because you need to go to the bathroom or you're on a trip or whatever, if you're giving them some educational content, that's gonna turn their brain to mush. No, I don't think so. That's why I don't think that screens need to be demonized. I just think that we need to recognize that if you're a teacher, that they're going to learn more from you than they're going to learn from a screen. So that is where we just need to be mindful and try to minimize screen use as much as we can. I think it is really important that we understand that it's not going to be easy to get screens out of schools until it becomes more of the norm. I just think it's very hard to expect a teenager to be the only one not on social media, to be the only one not using their phone in school. And so I think as we start to see some policies and some changes, I mean, even in Los Angeles, just this last month or two, I mean, it was a couple weeks ago now, they just said they're going to ban phones in schools. So, I mean, I have seen it moving that way this year, and we'll see kind of what comes of that. I think it's important as an educator and a parent to be realistic about what a phone can do in terms of safety. If you want your kid to have a phone for safety, then it can be a flip phone. It doesn't need the internet, and realistically, in some sort of emergency scenario, their phone's not going to do that much, most likely. So yes, I don't think you need the internet to or Instagram to be safe in a school. So there is no real reason in my mind that kids need to have phones in school, other than if you want it for a safety reason to contact you, get them a flip phone with no internet. They can put it in their bag. It doesn't come out during the day. They have it with them, and they can grab it if they need to or in an emergency. If you need to get a hold of your kid, you can call the school. They can get a hold of your child. That should be okay. And I think we just need to all accept that there might be a little bit of a lag in terms of getting hold of our kid, but we want them to be paying attention in school. We want them to be learning. We want them to be focused on building relationships and learning about life versus just being on their phone. And they can't help it. I mean, none of us can help it, right? We can't help being on our phones. It's very difficult to do unless you really are conscious about it. So we're not giving our kids a chance to learn. It's addictive and it's built for that. So we need to kind of get them away from it. And we also need to realize that if you look at the research on social media, 9 out of 10 kids or adults say that they would not be on social media if not for everybody else being on social media. Everybody knows that it's a problem. Everybody hates it in that way, but everybody doesn't want to be left out. And so if we can make it more normal and cool that you're not on social media until you're 16 or whatever, or even if you're on it, then it's not on your cell phone. Maybe you just have it on your computer. So you are on it, a little bit during the day. So you're not completely isolated right now, but we have to push it back in terms of the age when kids are on it. And then if they are already on it, I think we need to minimize the amount that they're using it. So get out of their room so they're not on it in the evening, so they're sleeping, not during the day when they're at school. I mean, these are basics, and we shouldn't be giving our kids a drug to use at school so they can't pay attention and learn. We don't have to. Like, they can have a phone for contact. They don't need internet during the day. They should be paying attention and learning.
It's true. I mean, even me, when I read Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation, when that was one of his solutions, was taking phones away from kids during the day, I thought it's not going to happen. And now I'm coming back around to it, especially with, your suggestion of doing the flip phones that don't have the social media and they don't have internet access. They're just phones. Remember, we used to survive with just phones before. That was in my lifetime. So it's really so important. Jonathan Haidt's own research showed that when social media came on, our kids' mental health, both girls and boys, fell off a cliff. And those are his words. And so that's really important. I think the other thing that really negatively impacted our kids, and again, at this July 4th party that I was just at, I was talking to a middle schooler, and she was talking about how difficult being home throughout COVID was. And then she talked about how isolated she felt and how difficult it was. There were 4 kids with 4 different screens in different areas of the home. The parents were working from home. So a little bit of chaos, but she was also talking about when she came back, how mean she thought the kids were. And she is going to a private school. It happens to be a Catholic school. And she was just saying, it seems like, and by the way, her mom heard her yelling. And so she went up to her room to figure out what was going on. And she had these virtual reality goggles on, and she was in a virtual room with other avatars of these middle school kids, and they were fighting and, dealing with mental illness in that room and trying to get their friends help, or telling them that they need help and having them resist. And it was just, she just ripped the goggles off of her daughter's face and said, "You're not doing this anymore, because I've never seen you like this. And this isn't the way to have a conversation in a virtual room." I had never heard of that, but I do know, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on what some doctors are calling COVID kids. So these kids are stunted, maybe not physically, but mentally and emotionally. And that's a name that I've heard them called, while they're now trying to get help to bring them back and be able to partake again in normal social interactions. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's a whole other talk for
I
another.
know.
No,
I know.
I'm not saying we could
Let you
just be
go
like,
without talking about it, though.
no, I agree. I was just gonna say that I think that the problem was there and it was getting worse, and COVID threw gasoline on a fire that was already burning, I think, and it made it so much worse. I mean, we literally did everything the opposite of what we should do for our mental health in terms of staying inside and not eating healthy and being in screens all day and not being social. Like these are all the things that make you go crazy and make, inmates go crazy and, isolation and all these things. So that's what happened. And we kind of put our kids and our teens in a situation that is not great for their mental health. It was terrible for their mental health. And we saw that in every single way. So it really just exacerbated everything. Thankfully, kids are very resilient, and I think that we can move backwards, and we can't change what happened, but we can continue to move forward. And I think that the problem with mental health is so much bigger than that's just one thing that made it so much worse. So I don't know that there's a great solution at this point from everything that happened from COVID, but I think all we can do is say, we can take from it that the problem was so big and so bad that this is something that we must do something about. It hopefully identified and brought it to light. And that is for sure true. I mean, we're talking about mental health more than we ever did. That is for sure. We're talking about health more than we ever have before. So that part is good. The issue is that we're not really making a lot of big changes, and we're not really seeing things move in that way in society, and it has to. But slowly, I think people are starting to be a little more mindful of it, and certain individuals and families are. And that is where, for me, coming back again to kind of the book and my kind of philosophy just in general, I don't know that we're going to change society today, right? I mean, you can go, and if you want to fight at Capitol Hill and become an activist, great, that's awesome. But we have to focus on ourselves and our families. And so I always try to talk about actionable steps, things that you can do for your family today. And that is where I think you're going to really see a change in your own family. And hopefully, as every family starts to change and more families, then companies change and society changes. And again, like with the phones, 2 years ago, we're not gonna have phones in school. That'd be crazy. But
Right.
one thing changed, another thing changed. Some people are more open to it. Schools are going to make changes. And if it becomes a little bit more normal, then it won't be so hard to have a conversation with your 12-year-old and say, look, the rules are no cell phones in school. So you don't need Instagram at school. If you want it for safety, I'll get you a little flip phone so you can get a hold of me, but that's what we're going to do. And you can have, an iPhone when you're 20 or whatever it is that parents decide. But it's really hard to do it if you're the only one. So it's slow changes family by family, and it becomes normal and cool if multiple people do it. And I think that's what we need to do with mental health. That's what we need to do with general health. And navigating a new world, just like you said, with virtual. I mean, that's gonna be the next, right? AI and virtual AI. I don't know how we're gonna handle that. We'll figure it out as we go. But I'm not afraid of technology. I just think we need to be mindful of it and use it in the best way possible. But you can't control society. Like, again, you can't control the air that you breathe, but you can put some plants in your house, right? You can't control the water in your city, but you could put a filter, right? So there are things that you can do to make a difference for your own family within the realm of what's actually realistic and possible. And that for most families is going to be good enough. It's not doom and gloom. There's still 50% of kids have a chronic disease, 50% don't. So you can be in the 50% that don't, and you can do everything you possibly can to make them resilient. And even if you do, they still might have something, and that's okay too. But the healthier we are, the better, right? There's no downside to eating a little healthier, to sleeping a little more, to exercising a bit more. I mean, that's good for everybody regardless. So those kind of foundational principles are important for us to remember, because everything is so fast paced, and we want to get things right now, and we want easy and convenient and cheaper, and that's not always the right thing, especially when you're talking about health.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have another question. With the presidential election going on right now, kind of the shot schedule has come into focus with our RFK Jr.'s running, and he talks about shots and how they can cause autism. And so I think we have, is it 87 shots now in the childhood schedule? And I'm just curious about what your take is on that, because I know a lot of people are second guessing whether that's a good idea and how to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, look, with vaccines, it's obviously the most controversial topic that there is, sadly. Whenever I'm asked about vaccines, the first thing I always want to mention is, to me as a practitioner and as a parent and as a wellness advocate, one of the most frustrating things is that we can't have a conversation about this. The word vaccine comes up and everybody kind of goes nuts and gets mad at everybody. And as soon as you start talking about it, you're in like a camp, like you're an anti-vaxxer or a pro-vaxxer, and there's no such thing. Right? Not really. People just want healthy kids, and they want to do what's best for their kids. And not everyone necessarily agrees on the route to get there. but they, fight about vaccines like it's, there's one side or the other. I'm not against vaccines. I think that I'm not against the concept. Certainly, if there's a magical pill that you could take to cure kids or prevent kids from all diseases, and that would be wonderful. But that is not the reality of the world. We have to weigh risks and benefits on everything. When it comes to vaccines, I think there's a lot of questions that parents have, a lot of questions that I get in the office, and there are not necessarily answers to all of those questions. So you have to go, in theory, with the best information that you have, and parents have to make a choice that is best for them. I never tell people what to do. I don't believe that in medicine we should be telling people what to do. I think that's true of everything. Our job as a doctor, in my opinion, is to teach, right? It's literally the word docere, doctor, means to teach in Latin. And so I think we need to bring in the best information that we have for parents, and then inform them of the different information and decisions that are possible and the risks and benefits to the best that we know it. And then people have to make their own decisions that is best for them. And with vaccines, there is a lot of information that kind of comes from companies. So it is hard to, understand sometimes the risk of everything together, or the risk of things over the long term, because not all the studies really do that. And you can only go with what is recommended. And technically what's recommended is the CDC, American Academy of Schedule. So that's what doctors recommend. That's the only thing you can recommend as a doctor. But there are a lot of parents, especially, that come to me that are, have many questions about shots, and I try to run them through the best of my knowledge of some of these things. But they're, I can't tell anybody not to do something. I mean, that's what the schedule is. Up to them if they choose to do something different or go on a slow schedule, or whatever it is. When it comes to a lot of these chronic diseases like autism, there still isn't the clear evidence that it's related. But of course, there's a lot of, discussion around it and anger. And again, it's like, I can't tell you what I don't know. The research at this point, medically speaking, says that it doesn't, but I've taken care of kids that have autism that never got a shot, so certainly can't be the only thing. And I think that there are many things that are contributing to all chronic disease. Putting it into one box is too simple. That's not how it is. I think there are many factors and many toxins and many things that we are exposed to, and for every kid it's a little bit different. But to me, as a parent, as a practitioner, nothing should ever be off the table. We should be thinking about these things. We should not trust companies to deal with our safety. We should have independent research that looks at all of this. And I think that, again, most parents that I see, I think, are representative of most parents out there, that they want to do what's best for their child. They want to keep them safe and healthy, and they are not sure how to get there. They don't want to give them something that's going to cause a reaction, but they don't want to not give them something that could prevent them from a disease, right? So I think that's where most people stand. And instead of arguing, we should be having open conversations about it, and discussing it as much as we can, and seeing, like, okay, well, is there something in one of these medical products that is contributing to eczema? Is it contributing to allergies? I don't know the answer, right? But like, shouldn't we say, like, oh, this thing is related to this, therefore maybe we can take that out and then make it better? Like, why are we not always trying to make these things safer and better? That's what should be doing for everything. But we need some independent people to do that, and it's not really the easiest thing to get, and it's very expensive to do, and there's a lot of ethics around those studies too. So I think that it's not a simple concept, but it's super frustrating as a parent and a pediatrician, because we're missing some data that we really need. And again, if it wasn't so divisive and controversial, then we could have conversations. I think we could move to a better place for everybody that's in the middle somewhere. I don't think that you're magically, you call me an anti-vaxxer? No, of course not. Like, I'm not against vaccines. I'm for healthy kids, right? I'm for people making choices that are the best for them, and informing people so they can choose what they want to do. But we're missing some information, and we're missing a discussion that has to be had, so we can get to the best place. You can't tell people what to do. We need to teach them based on information. And right now there's a lot of telling.
And I always say, if it seems like it's coming from a political lens, either party, then put that away, because it has nothing to do with politics, really. It has everything to do, as you said, with your child's health. So kind of to wrap it up here, although we could go on for forever, I think. So we start with personal responsibility, and it's really kind of interesting because our whole conversation kind of followed along the lines of how I think about school safety as well, addressing the root cause, taking responsibility for it. Everybody's a little bit nervous and afraid to send their kids to school. And teachers I know also think about it when they're in the classroom. And it's like, I think we're almost numb to it at this point and feeling like there's nothing that we can do, when in essence, it's our responsibility to keep our kids safe. And again, as you said, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not fault finding. I'm just saying, hey, we want to have safe schools. We're going to have to do something to make them safe. And it starts, as you said as well, with us. It starts with taking responsibility for what's going on in our world with our kids, and then making healthy choices, making the right choices, maybe not necessarily the easy choices, but doing the research online and verifying it with somebody who seemingly knows, like you. Start following your social media and visit your website. Definitely read your book, Parenting at Your Child's Pace. We're going to make sure that everyone has all of your information so they can continue to follow you. I am so appreciative of you being on the Choose Love Movement podcast. Do you want to leave the audience with kind of some final words of wisdom?
Sure. I love to finish by reminding parents that no one's really ever been a parent or an educator of kids until you do it. And it's in us, it's innate in us. We all have it. We're all able to do it, and I think we need to trust our parenting gut or educator gut, whatever that is. And there's no better example of that than when I see parents kind of come through my office and seeing them with the first kid versus the second kid versus the third kid. It's the same parent, but they're like so much more confident second and third kid. I don't see them for like weeks. I'm like, why didn't you call me 2 weeks ago for that problem? First kid, they're like, the wind blows the wrong way and they're, super concerned about everything, which is reasonable, but it's just a reminder that like, we know what we're doing. We know how to do it. It's in you. And there are a lot of resources that you can go to if you're not too sure, but you have this, we can do it, and trust your gut. I wasn't, I was nervous becoming a parent, even a pediatrician, nervous about being a parent, but you figure it out as you go. You really do.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And in the end, it's you, and I do believe that there's a small, quiet space, maybe our spirit within us that knows. And if we can connect with that, and there is, as you said, there is this gut instinct that we have. We are literally created to procreate and have babies. And so there is some natural instinct in there, and we can't forget that. But, and of course, I think the number one most important thing for parenting is, love, nurturing, healing love. That's Jesse's message on the chalkboard. And of course, that's what we spread. So, wow. Thank you so much for jumping on with us. I really appreciate it. I hope that you'll come back and do another segment. Maybe we can have some educators and parents write in some questions for you. It's been really, really fascinating. I appreciate it. Please, everybody, go out and get a copy of Dr. Joel Gator Warsh's book, Parenting at Your Child's Pace. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I would love to come back.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Cool. Thank you. That was awesome. We just went in there and did it.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I would love to. I'm going to be, when the book comes, I don't know if you, for anything like your online, like I'm doing a lot of like Instagram lives and Q&As. So I don't know when you're gonna be able to get this out, but if you were able to get it out before the book or around the book, then we can do it anyways, but we can certainly do something around that week. I have those 2 weeks off to just do lives, Q&As, anything that's useful for an audience. So if
Totally. I want to do that. We will definitely schedule that. And I have the book. I'll read it by then, and I can't wait. That's awesome. So, cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Really nice to meet you. I'm glad we're connected.
You too. Yeah. Thank you. That was a great interview. It was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Hey, oh, it's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let it in. Let the healing